WWE doesn't do things quietly, and nor should they. As a publicly traded company, it's important not to pull any surprises from nowhere because you will spook your stockholders and potentially cause a rupture. I mean, you don't see Casper anywhere around the place, do ya? That is not good business. It's why when we jumped into the HD era, it was promoted, and why the same happened when we switched to PG. These were well thought out ideas to help the bottom line. This isn't always the case, though. In fact, there have been some true what the hell moments throughout the years that few saw coming, and while those in the inner circle will have known, I bet even they were stunned. Some of these are just so mad. I'm Simon from What Culture, though, and this is 10 times WWE made massive changes that you didn't even see. Number 10, all the smoke. When WWE was trying to win back viewers from WCW in the mid-90s, they tried everything. It seemed slightly inconspicuous throughout 1995 and some of 1996, but when Nitro switched to 2 hours and debuted Scott Hall as some kind of renegade, everything changed. The full stop coming with the formation of the NWO. Vince McMahon, of course, went into fighting mode, and along with USA Network executives, they sat down to figure out how to make the necessary sweeping changes to the roster, one of which still exists to this day. Kinda. When Raw gave itself some war in 1997, it added some serious fire and fury pyro that felt like World War III was about to kick off, and my word, did it rock. It's why so many fans want more today, but there were so many of these things, it filled the ring with smoke that would still be hanging around when the matches kicked off. It meant smoke removers had to be brought in to clear the space, so when Stone Cold Steve Austin arrived, it didn't like your dad coming home through some fog. And they are still doing this today, and it came from nowhere. Number 9, Eric Bischoff's 2019 WWE arrival and then departure. Eric Bischoff's surprising return to the company in 2019 melted the internet down. Along with Paul Heyman on Raw, the former WCW head would see over SmackDown, and the hype was real. People were really excited about this, and yet it was over before it even began. We only saw him on screen once, and to use Bischoff's own favourite term, the coffee was still hot when he was told to leave. Speaking to TalkSport, Eric gave some details about this, and it was mostly that even though he was brought in to help manage the creative process, he didn't really adapt to how WWE was operating. McMahon didn't feel like Bischoff was fulfilling the role how it was intended, and that was that. Onwards he went. So this was twofold really, as no one actually thought he was going to come in anyway, and then we were all stunned when he was gone again before we could say, I'm back and better than ever. Bischoff struggled then really, so hopefully the split helped all round. I don't want anyone to be sad. Number 8, Stephanie McMahon replaces Kreski. WWE in the year 2000 rocked. The company had a roster that was great, and with its competition falling by the wayside, the future seemed bright if your name was Vincent Kennedy McMahon. There was a thought that it may be a rocky time given previous head writer Vince Russo had moved to WCW, but this was all sorted thanks to his replacement, Kreski. A guy that got laughed at because he went all in with his presentations and drew up character arc storyboards, the approach breathed new health across the whole show and made sure that the entire team knew where we were going. We start here, we go there, we do a twist and a turn, and then we'll move on. Now, of course, his run would have had a shelf life like anybody else's, but it was stopped in its pomp in November of that year when Stephanie McMahon took over the gig and decided to bring in a host of writers instead of relying on a few brains. It was a huge internal change that WWE still uses today, and it's also a contentious one. Not everyone agrees with it, but at this stage, I don't think it will ever change. Number 7, Bruce Prichard gets fired. Happening in 2008, it wasn't really the nature of Bruce Prichard's firing, but what it represented in the grand scheme of things. The corporate structure of WWE was changing in the mid-2000s, and a lot of the old heads were going to roll, and roll they did. Bruce was on this list, and it was a big deal because outside of a short absence between 1991 and 1992, Prichard had been on the books for almost 20 years. For ages, no one really knew what had happened until he returned for a podcast series with Conrad Thompson to blow the lid off it. Documenting a long and challenging relationship with the previously mentioned Stephanie McMahon, there was a power struggle and a breakdown in communication which ultimately made Bruce not too happy at work. For some reason, he then decided to bring a gun to a DV taping, and unsurprisingly, that was the final straw. Wrestling, ladies and gentlemen, it is always bizarre. Number 6, In Your House Comes of Age. Sometimes it is the simple decisions. When WWE aired Ground Zero in September 1997, they took their In Your House concept, added an hour to the running time, charged more cash, and set a whole new business model that they rely on till the end of life itself. With no real shouting about it, viewers just saw that an extra $10 was now required, but this also gave them 60 minutes more of television entertainment. Doesn't sound like much, but those soon added up, especially as WWE went from strength to strength during this time. It soon saw the In Your House subtitle dumped altogether, and what was meant to be cheap digestible pay-per-views then just became pay-per-views with a price point to match. B-shows be damned, these were now the monthly real deal. The name was killed in 1999, and by then the creative and fiscal decisions made by Vince McMahon had sent them flying and put them on course to be the big dog. It would be over 20 years later until In Your House would return as a fun NXT event, and even then, that's only because the flippin' world closed down. And to think this one happened on the quiet, madness. Number 5, Michelle Wilson and George Barrios get fired. Even I gasped at this one, and let's be honest, what do I actually know about WWE's corporate structure? Nothing. What I was aware of, though, was that Michelle Wilson and George Barrios were considered Vince McMahon's right-hand people, but to see them let go in 2020 was mad. Hired in 2009 and 2008 respectively, this pair rose rapidly through the ranks to become vice presidents and were all about that money. They likely played a part in why Raw went to 3 hours in 2010, SmackDown triggered the live switch in 2016, and the whole WWE network. Wilson and Barrios loved that idea. It's even said they came up with the concept of pushing the free month as hard as WWE did. Clearly Wall Street were fond of them too, because within a day of their firing, the stock dropped 23% to $47.97 per share. As I'm talking now, it's still fighting back from that point, which is crazy. It seems as if the straw that broke the camel's back was McMahon's desire to take WWE's big shows and put them back on pay-per-view, essentially ending the major selling point of the network. Now, nothing has happened there as of yet, but keep an eye out. I don't think this new free tier has been added for our health. Number 4, floating on the New York Stock Exchange. And we just talked about stock. On October 25th, 2000, WWE did take this huge jump, and as Linda McMahon said at the time, doing this would position WWE among the premier businesses in the world and secure the future of the company for years. Their global awareness would also grow, and this was a time for celebration. Obviously, the main reason was financial and to boost profits as much as possible. That's what businesses do. The only downside, if you're a fan, is that there was a shift in the sense now stockholders had to be appeased by any means necessary. It's why a lot of those changes we chatted about in the last entry happened. Everybody thought it would help no end. It did make a lot of people rich, so I suppose that was a success, but it was all going on behind the scenes as we debated what was next for The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin. Number 3, the vanishing of the Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan. This happens all the time now, but that doesn't make it right. Stories just fall off the radar in 2020 as if there's a giant hole in the ground that randomly eats people up. But imagine all of that in the early 90s when it came to two of the biggest stars WWE had. It was unreal. But between 1991 and 1993, Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior both left the promotion, and the explanation was basically, don't worry about it. One such idea was that after SummerSlam 1991, the Warrior had decided to just keep his entrance run going as long as possible, and his chosen route took him all the way to WrestleMania 8 when he finally returned. And sure, yeah, why not? This apparently knocked Hogan for 6 though, because on that note, he was then gone without a trace. There was no reason as to what the deal was, and the Ultimate one didn't last long either. What was more bizarre is when Hulk came back for WrestleMania 9, hanged around for King of the Ring, and then he left once more. By magic, he was in WCW before long, and if you truly brought into wrestling stories, your brain basically fell out of your ear here and collapsed in a heap because it was just too much. Number 2, the vanishing of Steve Austin and The Rock. And it was also too much here. I think we can see a pattern forming. With the same kind of meh attitude that had happened before, both Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock seemed to be erased from reality in 2004. I guess they entered the Twilight Zone. Shortly after that year's WrestleMania, the Rattlesnake fell foul of Vince McMahon over the rights to the Stone Cold nickname, which stopped his on-screen role at the time as the Raw Sheriff. Was there any mention of this? Of course not. Later on, The Rock's contract ran out, and I think WWE was so mad that he'd found success in Hollywood that they just didn't bother to negotiate a new one. It was a sticking point between the two for ages, and I'm not surprised the Great One must have felt snubbed. From 2005, Austin had returned for mostly cameos, but it wasn't until 2011 that the People's Champ came back. So what the hell did he do for 7 years? Some say he was in the movies, but I'm pretty sure that was a different person. Before the comments go nuts, That's obviously a joke. Number 1, WWE HQ. Weird one this, but it is cool. Earlier in 2020, WWE decided to take advantage of the current global situation as best possible by holding the Money in the Bank match within their home offices. Fans always get excited about this because who doesn't want to go on a tour? And throughout the years, we've been able to see it evolve and change. From the access beyond the mat we're given in the 90s to seeing The Undertaker waiting for the chairman to finish lifting weights in the last ride, if you've got an eagle eye, you can even see the differences pre and post Scratch logo and pre and post WWF to WWE. That happened in 1999 and 2000, and this was updated again in 2014 with the launch of the network. Obviously, they were never going to publicize these moves because there was no need to, but it still rocks to get the insight. Somehow open the damn warehouse to the public already too. I want to see all those buried alive caskets. And that is not a good sentence out of context. Know of any other times WWE made massive changes that you didn't even see? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Then head over to whatculture.com and read yourself some articles, and follow What Culture on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. My name is Simon from What Culture. I love you all, and I'll talk to you again soon.